Hey everyone, he needs 20. Okay, so another 6 chapters of Xenoblade Chronicles Mira has passed, so it is time to read another 6 reviews. We're up to 18, which I posted yesterday, which is now Janix's canon birthday, March 21st, 2020. Yesterday. So she's born this day, and by the time the events of the story roll around, she's 34 or 36, depending on which timeline we're in. There won't be so much to worry about that later. Well, 34 or 34 plus 2M, as I established in chapter 18. So we're going to go back to chapter 13 to start, which is Lawless. Oh my gosh. This was a trial. It was this chapter and Perspective were a bit tough to write because of the combat. But Perspective was actually tough for everything except the combat. This one was tough for all the combat. Because we had the fight in the present day, in the past present day, where they took on the Lawless, and then we had the fight in the past, where the Lawless first betrayed everyone. So it just fights all around, and it sometimes it wears me out. But I love doing it. When I finally got into the flow and I started writing this chapter, I'm like, it's good. And I thought it would be long as a chapter until the end of part 1, but then Perspective wound up being a lot longer for a completely different reason. Anyway, we'll start with the review for Lawless. Let me see. Boop. Here we go. Alright. I guess the one bad thing about the present past alternating stories is that even knowing that this is not wholly, if at all, in continuity with the game or my other works, we know who in the past has plot armor thanks to them still existing in the present. Though that really doesn't ease up any feeling of dread regarding losses. Only Elma's in a mim, after all, and for all I know at this point, Gwyn could lose an eye, tie an arm. Yeah, it'll get better in that case, but still, it kind of sucks for them in their present. True. I toss around the idea of doing something to them in the past, but I didn't really get it. Which is funny, because then there's what I do to Janix in the past with damaging her spine. I didn't really see much reason to. And yeah, it is kind of a thing, because everybody got in pretty rough shape at the end of Lawless, but they're all fine, because they're on the White Whale. Yo, it's Alexa, and she and Jay are friends already. Oh, and I guess Albert Wesker, Hideo Kojima, HB's here too. Honestly, they're really psyched to see these two back. Yep. Okay, good. I was getting worried about Flame coming up in flashbacks and kept thinking to myself that I could have sworn there was something alluding to Flame still being around in the past, present, tense. Anyways. That's at least another Copeland was still alive until the Arcs launch, and that it wouldn't just be the coups as the Skell Genius is at work. That does make me wonder, though, if Janix also would be interested in the long-range communication that Fowler and Elma were developing in their present voyage. Yeah, which is something I hit up on in the later chapters on the White Whale, where Elma brings it up very briefly, or she's going to, but then she decides against it because she's not sure if it's a good idea. Yeah, I liked bringing Alexa and HB in. There was always the plan to have Alexa, HB, and Flame all as a team. And the reason why Flame wasn't brought up in the story sooner was because I actually wasn't sure if Flame's owner would be okay with that. Because Flame is an OC created by a friend of mine, and we got together and made Janix and Flame sisters. But I didn't know at the time of writing the story if she'd be okay with me using Flame in a more important role. And so because of that, I only had Flame alluded to and had Janix talking about her, but I didn't think I'd be able to actually use her fully. And so once I did, I established a time when I could have Janix go see her, and then we could introduce her as herself, which is good. What was I hitting? Right. By the time we realized that they were our target. Wow, Torres, I wasn't aware that you had such low expectations for your men. But yeah, sorry, I just found this typo kind of humorous. Gosh, I hate typos. But it happens, Well, at least Charmaine and Chen-Chi were real and not some figment of Lao's imagination. The new 52 freeze situation I brought up. So he still has tragic villain status. I wonder who in the Coalition ordered to pull the trigger on them, though if they weren't just doomed to burn with the Earth in this continuity. Could be the same guy for all I know. Now I just have this mental image of if/when Lao dies in this fic, his socks are missing. I'll try to get that image out of my head long before the deed is done. Well, the deed was done at the very end of the chapter, so hopefully the image was out of your head. But yeah, Charmaine and Shenji. Yeah, that was it. They were just a figment of the imagination. Nope. And I believe that who was responsible was eventually revealed, because we got through most of the stuff in the next few chapters about finding out all the pieces of the conspiracy. Was Torres Volgan in another life? I actually didn't think about Volgan at all when I was writing that scene, but then I was like, yeah, that's true. I like Volgan. I like Metal Gear. Something I find humorous about Lao saying he's not here to talk. So he thinks there's no reasoning with the coalition forces and that violence is the only solution regarding them and their plans, but believes there's a chance that humanity could talk with two impending genocidal warring factions into taking their conflict elsewhere because... Oh, because Lao's dumb. No. Lao specifically meant that he wasn't here to talk to Elma. He just wanted to fight and kill her because he, based off the fact that he knows everything about everything, he kind of blames exclusively her for how everything is turning out and the lies. But I totally understand what you mean too. I think also in some ways you could still interpret it as him not making sense, and that's kind of the point, because I interpreted Lao as a bit cuckoo for this story. I still think he works much better as a full-time villain than anything else. Oh, please tell me Lila's knives are serrated. Yeah, they are. They all the knives for the characters are like. Geez, even the Ares is bad at keeping Elma's secrets. Good thing Jay doesn't care much for those sorts of details, especially in a high-stress situation like that. Yeah, I threw those in as a little tease when the thing mentioned specifically Watcher and Tandem. That was what Elma told Janix was her password for controlling the Ares Watcher. Few things in XCX Fix are as satisfying as reading the words Agasura Cannon. Yep. I forgot the name of the Ares' other attacks, like the nunchuck and the sword and the guns, the Gatling guns. I should look it up at some point. It's a good thing Taurus had the common sense to use AC power, apparently. If it were DC, both he and Lila would be fried, as they both wouldn't be able to break free of the current until the charge wore off. Still, being on the receiving of AZ power isn't pleasant to be for sure. I didn't think about that at all, honestly. I just thought, oh, cool, I gave him electrical powers because I thought that'd be a cool way to do a cool fight between him, Kumon, and Lila. And I'm like, that'd be pretty rad, so I gave him electrical powers. And I specifically had that moment in with the charge going through both of them, simply because I'm like, well, it's going to bite him in the ass at some point, you know? I thought that would work, and also Lila's blades are conducive. And so she stabbed it through him, and it looped through there back into him. Just because I figure, well, electricity does that, right? I don't do a lot of research beyond. It's just... Yeah, I should. At least even to the end, he saw Doug as a friend. Shame for him that friendship would betray him in the end. Yeah, and Lao didn't die there because I wanted Janix to shoot him in the head, but that was Elma's personal victory against him. Lao, Master Sniper, can't even keep track of how many rounds he's fired off in the heat of combat. To be fair, that wasn't his gun that he was using when he realized the clip was empty. He stole either Elma or Janix's gun, one of them. And then he used them, but the guns were already used up at that point. So yeah, but still. So not so much a trigger that was intentionally pulled, but a pin that was accidentally removed. Yep. For what happened to Nantucket. Honestly, I'd believe that if what few women who would have served Lao likely got torn to shreds by Janix on their fatal day. Yep, they did. I thought it was funny because every time I mentioned the Lawless and people fighting them, it was always men's voices or guys yelling. And so I decided, instead of going back and editing it so they're women, I'll put in a reason why he wouldn't want more women to serve with him. Now this is a Cross who wouldn't have had any of Lao's Chapter 9 mind games, not even letting Elma get the kill like in your other What If fic. But then it has to be Janix or else she'd never get her resolution. Hoo boy, between all the wounds, holes, burns, and smoke and hail, I don't see these 4 coming out of the hospital anytime soon. Nope, 3-month time skip. Or at least 3 of the 4. Elma's always been a special case. Something tells me Chapter 15 isn't going to be the end of the past segment, and I'm excited to see how far the Trail of Corruption goes. It goes really far up, as we've all become well aware of now that most of that is over. Sorry, did you? I didn't mean to open Discord there. I was trying to click on OBS. Here we go. Into chapter 14. What's chapter 14? So yeah, writing Lawless was a blast. I really super did enjoy it. Anything trivia wise to mention about Lawless that might be interesting? It always had to end the same way with Janix shooting Lao, but I actually misread the quote originally. Like in my head, before Janix shot Lao, I imagined him saying, "What's it gonna be, the head or the chest?" But then I read it and I'm like, "Oh, he says the chest first?" Okay. So that was the one thing. I didn't know that. It's been so long since I played Xenoblade Chronicles X. No desire to play it again. But I actually did look up dialogue from the game because that was supposed to be a direct reference to his death at the end of, or at least to that scene in Xenoblade Chronicles X. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there was any other cool stuff that could. It's been a while. Oh yeah, this chapter also marked the debut of Overdrive. This is the first time Overdrive was actually used in the fic, and it was by Elma in order to fight Lao, which I love. The fight against Lao, writing it was just such a blast. It went through so many phases. It was like Elma versus Lao, Janix versus Lao, Elma and Janix versus Lao. You know, it went through all those different takes, and him having the ability to go ghost basically. And just disappear, and then everyone had to rely on sound and thing. And then also I threw in him being able to ricochet bullets, and I wanted to make the fight cool. You know, like I don't like Lao, but I have to admit making him be able to go invisible and having bouncing bullets and stuff made him really cool, and it helped the fight be really good. In my opinion, right up until they stabbed him in the arm, and then shot him in the head. Yeah, and then the past segment was actually my favorite thing to write too. The flashback to the massacre and everything that led up to it, the death of Janix's mom and dad, and the original fight against Lao and Torres in the past, and Archer's involvement with it, Steven. But what was really cool is that last scene, after Lao's dead, the last flashback that the chapter ends on, I actually copy-pasted that scene from the previous chapter, where I remember you commented, who did Kumon just save, you know, because he found the body, he found someone alive among a bunch of bodies, but there was no context. So I copied that scene into this one. I got rid of a lot of the fluff dealing with Kumon arriving, talking to the medical people, this, that. And it's really cool because in the first scene, Kumon leans in to listen to Steven tell him something, but we don't hear, I didn't write what Steven told him. And then when he goes to find Janix, which I didn't say it was Janix, he tells her something, but once again, I don't specify what it is. So this version has the rest of that scene, and that was just a fun thing that I like to do. To just like add new context to it. Anyway, now we can move on to chapter 14, Calm. Aboard the White Whale we go. How fortunate that Mira operates on a 24-hour, 365-day system. To make celebrating birthdays a lot more difficult, even though the only one who had it celebrated in-game was Tatsu. I guess technically any Noirs too, but there were no celebrations proper for them. And Coco could have easily told Elma when it was coming up, even if Mira wasn't so much like Earth in its orbit around its sun. Yeah, it's a weird thing, but they didn't create a calendar, and I'm not going to, so I'm just going to stick to 24 hours, 365 days. Shame there's no fabricators for commercial goods in-game, but then I have a feeling that would put Elle out of a job. Or maybe it would have enhanced his work, considering that's what he's able to do with his wares. Who knows? Oh yeah, this was a chapter where they celebrated Kumon's birthday, and they fabricated instruments for each other. Because that was... Gonna be honest, I totally forgot that was a thing. And I felt really bad about it. That was a whole thing. There was a whole story behind it back in the original continuity, where Kumon wanted everybody to master some form of the arts to help maintain their calm times, basically, like when they're not on the job, that they have something to do. It's just playing instruments, or in Janix's case, dancing. So I just felt really bad that I totally forgot about that plot point, but I reintroduced it here. Maybe a little ham-fisted, but it's something. Now that I've had time to think about more about the last chapter, something that's bothering me about Fowler in relation to dark matter. Where was she when the Nantucket site was wiped off the map? I would think that even with all the cover-ups, or perhaps because of the cover-ups, something like that would have drawn her curiosity to that matter long before she uncovered that the ECP was experimenting with dark matter and the Coalition keeping last focused on their tasks. Yeah, that's a good point. And I did actually mention it in the most recent chapter where Chris and Elma have a talk about Nantucket, and Chris was always interested in it, in looking into it, but she always had other things on her plate that prevented her from looking into it. Not to mention, like, just everything about her relationship with the Coalition is odd. But so that's just basically it. She didn't have the time, but she always was curious about it. Because it's not something that happens. And like she says, it doesn't make any sense. There's no way an explosion could do what it did to Nantucket. Which, by the way, Nantucket is a location in Moby Dick. Let's see. I'm curious as to what would make Janix so full of rage at this point, short of another Ganglion or ghost encounter, or finding out that it was the ECP that made Lao the way he was. The main difference between Jay and Lao in this case is that Lao never got his closure while he's still alive and could never begin to heal. Jay at least had the opportunity to close that book with Lao's death, though whether or not she's keeping it open just in case remains to be seen. Yeah, that was just more Elma's concern. She's worried about her. And as we know from the dance, they have a talk about it specifically. Why attack on someone from Earth? Has word gotten out that people have been intercepting transmissions from the enemy or other arcs? Or that there's a Xeno on board? Because I would think that unless any of the above happened, I would assume everybody on board the whale is from Earth. Yeah. That was a mistake. That was dialogue that did not... I actually meant for it to come off more as Cruz being awkward and trying to play coy with who it was he was going to go meet, because he didn't want people to know he was going to go meet with Harriet. But yeah, it does come off as odd, as an odd specification. Cruz is awkward. That's the excuse I gave. I would give. I mean, Diamond can be unbreakable with the right tools. And speaking of JoJo, you're correct. And speaking of JoJo, that's another mystery en route. Interesting take on the whole Crossus amnesiac angle for this continuity. Yep. Not exactly amnesiac, but Cruz does not remember his birth family. It's not even his real last name, Volif. The potties Dolaris could whip up. One of the many reasons they became mediators, I'm sure. And now I've just got this mental image of Jay lapping everyone saying on your left. Absolutely. Absolutely she would. You know, it's a damn shame that Mira assumed the position of universal translator for all life on it that's capable of speech. I would love to hear what everyone's native tongues sounded like. One of the many appealing things about non-humans and things like Star Wars, Star Trek, Dragon Ball with the Namekians and so on, even other fictional languages that are based on established languages like the ancient language from the Telius Fire Emblem games or Dragon Speak shouts from Skyrim. Yeah, I have... Part of me has wanted to try to explain what Elma's native tongue sounds like, but I have no idea what I would want to make it sound like. My default was to go with Latin, which is super obvious, simply because the Vita's name is Latin for life. Aeon and Elma even specifically mentioned that when they're first talking about the Vita. Like, what does that thing have to do with life? But, and also the Vita was the name assigned to the Ghost super weapon by the Ganglion. Which I also realize is a retcon, because the more I read about the lore that we had from the original game, I realize that the Vita belongs to the Ganglion. They're the ones that made it, because the Great One is the one who's supposed to pilot it, and I think it's supposed to be theirs, but that doesn't make sense to me, because the game confirms multiple times that the Vita is powered by dark matter. It even has a dark matter core on it, just like the Ghosts. So I'm like, it's a Ghost weapon, not a Ganglion weapon. There's no way that it could be a Ganglion weapon. And then part of me also, I had some dialogue in the story, I hope I took all of it out, alluding to the fact that the Ghosts were once part of the Ganglion, or once part of Samar along with the Ganglion before they broke apart. But then I was confused about that, so I looked it up, and they're not. They're a completely separate faction. The Ganglion are a gang within Samar. The Ghosts are something completely different. and Samara is something completely different. So yeah, those are just some things I need to clarify. Also, gonna be honest with you, I forgot the Great One was a thing completely, and I have, as of right now, no idea if I should try to dive into that plot point at all, because I don't know what answer I can give to the Great One. I got nothing. Like, super honest. I mean, the game doesn't give us anything in regards to it. It just says that there is a Great One who can control 100% of Vita's power, blah, blah, blah. And I just have no idea who that would be or what I could make it in my continuity. I mean, I'm still going to mess with the gangland a bit moving forward when we reach Mira. I'm telling you right now, I am diving deep into ghost lore. So I'm going to make them big focus as we move forward in the story. So I hope you're interested in that. I have some ideas for what I want to do with the ghosts, since nothing else was done with them otherwise. The game pretty much forgot they existed. I think it's super disappointing that there wasn't a ghost super boss in Xenoblade Chronicles X. Like, after you finish the game. Like, because when you finish the game, a few new super bosses pop up around the world, you know? Like the Chimera that escapes from the life hold and finds its way to Noctilum in that cave, that guy. That's, like, really cool. Like, just, like, from a storytelling standpoint in universe, that, like, oh yeah, one probably could escape and find his way there, and then you can track it down later. It's such a bummer that there wasn't, like, just a secret ghost super boss. I think that would have been awesome, like, for real. And I was sad that that's not a thing, because it's what I like about the Code Vein DLC. You hear about horrors the entire game and you only ever see one, but the Code Vein DLC bosses are horrors. So it's just, that kind of stuff is rad. Oh yeah, JNix, the on your left thing, I love it. So moving on, was there anything interesting about Calm? I don't remember much about Calm. Not really. At least nothing that I could think of. I'm looking, scanning through it really quickly. It's been so long since I submitted this, because in between all this I had the investigation. Oh yeah, Elma killed Benton. This is the chapter where I revealed that. And she told Chris. Alright, D030, the other mega city that Benton ran off to, Queeg. I believe that's also a person in Moby Dick. So with the exception of Noah's Cradle, all the other ARC ships and all the other mega cities are named after stuff from Moby Dick. Nantucket, Pequod, the White Whale itself, Queeg, all of it. I had fun. Chapter 15, 2054. Oh yeah, I did add a scene there with Chris and Aaron. I don't like to do that, but I did it because I needed to. And you mentioned it. Caught up with the addition to Chapter 14. And if anything, I'm glad that Aaron at least acknowledged that Elma came by. I did find it odd that such a high-profile figure, who had also been further prodding into dark matter, would visit the researcher doing said prodding in secrecy, but I figured it would have been addressed eventually. I'm just going to imagine that Bose and Fry were part of the reinforcements, maybe even Kristoff Sr., but between Nagi, the Killer Ostrich, and the Mad Monk, they probably cleaned the house. Yep, and I introduced all those characters not long after. With Lila being unconscious for 5 weeks, I would think that at this point it would have been better to put at least Janix or maybe Kumon in Mims. Obviously, it's not all ethical since they'd be put in without consent, but still. It was definitely a conversation that was had. Because as we would reveal Janix's spinal damage, they probably definitely thought, well, we might as well put her in a Mim. But Elma is resolute that they have to consent. I think the only way Elma would ever, without their consent, put anyone in Skells is if they were dying. Put them in Mims, I mean. No more of an ambush than what happened at her apartment. At least Elma had Gwen and Irina tell her ahead of time rather than lack a response from Chris. When is Skell parking ever not awkward, aside from when they're in a hangar proper? That's true. I have a friend of mine who makes it a point to show. She used to show me a lot of screenshots she took of her Skell parked in just absolutely ridiculous places. It's a lot of fun. Not how I imagined Doug would go out. I would have thought he'd at least take the arena route of taking suicidal missions with good pay. If he dies, he dies. If he survives, at least he can work on paying off his old man's debt. If he's going to live through all that until Doomsday, at least he'd enjoy a cold one before being wiped from existence. That's actually exactly how I imagine Doug going out in this continuity. I think maybe you might have misinterpreted. From how I read that comment, I imagine that you thought that Doug like killed himself. He didn't. He just didn't answer the door because he already knew that he already knew it was Elma, and he already knew that she was coming to tell him that she killed Lao, and he didn't need to hear it. He had already accepted it. So from now until the Exodus, he's just in his home. That's where he's chosen to remain, and that's where he's chosen to die. I like how any damage dealt by Torres to Lila and Kumon are negligible. Like, that's how small he was compared to Lao. Real talk though, maybe worth mentioning injuries sustained from that fight. Seriously, he's only mentioned once in this chapter. Give the guy some credit, or at very least his fight. He did spend time writing his fight with Lila and Kumon, planning out the choreography and logistics. May not have been the main feature of Chapter 13, but there was still considerable time and effort put in. No shame in acknowledging that. Yeah. I didn't really think about that at all. Writing the chapter, I didn't see any reason to. But it's a good point. That's why I threw in the line in the next chapter, where Dr. Bradbury asks if Lila and Kumon are still taking their pain medication. And Aaron's like, I'm on their ass about it every day. That's specifically a reference to the damage they took from Lao and Torres. So there you go. I did that just for you. Even in other fics and different generations, Burt Whistle and Kristoff don't see eye to eye. Nope. Just based off what we know about Fry and HB, I wouldn't think they would. Not really related to the fic, but I find that if their human companions aren't feeling well, domesticated cats will try to get as close as possible and purr. Science shows that the frequency at which a cat purrs is meant to promote healing, supported by the fact that cats also purr when under distress to help calm themselves. Just nice to see Cuddle Cat at work and providing emotional support. Yeah, that's exactly why I wrote that scene with Aegis comforting Elma. It's really nice. Nothing about Fogg getting in trouble at school to sate his own curiosity. Wonder if Michael was present for those parent-teacher conferences. He was indeed. I didn't mention it in the story, and I probably won't. But it is just Michael, Fogg, and Fry. So Michael probably had to attend to the conferences. Reeve, huh? I don't suppose he thought he could do good by leading the coalition, but found that a faceless organization had difficulties putting the people they're supposed to be serving before results. Or a cat robot that provides phony fortunes. So I told my sister this story, but when I read that comment, I believe I had no idea what you were talking about. Legitimately no clue. I'm like, a cat robot that reads fortunes. What is this man on about? What's he saying? Stop talking. And I just really confused by it. And after reading the comment like 3 or 4 more times, I realized you were making a Final Fantasy VII joke. And here's the fascinating thing. I named Reeve specifically because of Final Fantasy. I was thinking about Final Fantasy VII when I named Reeve. And yet somehow I did not expect you to make a Final Fantasy VII reference with Reeve's name, even though that's exactly why his name is Reeve. I got nothing to say to that, except that I'm smart. I'm very smart. I mean, for all she knows, the hospital room in which Chris is staying is no more secure than Elma's apartment, given how there were people working inside the Coalition who wanted to see her dead. But at least there's actual security from the ECP at the cost of near total privacy. Yep. There is indeed. Michael is to be trusted. He's a Kristoff, and we like Kristoffs. I have to wonder how effective that anti-scale tech would have been if the Arcs were outfitted with them. Probably a little bit, considering the enemy machines. Which, that's a hard thing. What the hell am I supposed to call the ganglion weaponry? I call them machines, weapons, the satyrs, the Gowlers, the Kumovas, which I just mentioned in the most recent chapter. In-game, they're referred to as ganglion skulls, but I don't know why the people in here would refer to them as that, because skulls are specifically what the humans have. I'll think of something, or maybe I'll just have them decide to start calling them skulls as well, just as a catch-all term for satyrs, Galders, and Kumovas. Even if the motives and end goals are different, Crusades and the people leading them are always the same. Yep, Stephen Harper begins his descent. Odd that I spent 3 months in bed and can't be bothered to stand. Atrophy and being stuck on IVs will do that to you, Jay. It doesn't matter how physically fit you are. Yep, it will indeed. Those eyes wouldn't have happened to be gold, would they? Not that that detail would narrow it down if they're good or bad. Guess we need to know the coat color, if it's gray or black. The possibility only just dawned on me, but is Elma shooting Benton also a parallel to your what if fic where she pulls the trigger on Lau in XCX11 instead of letting Lin and Cruz or Cross try to stop her? It wasn't, I'll be honest, but maybe at the same time it kind of was subconsciously. I mean, who knows? Also, the eyes being gold thing, I also didn't understand that reference. I can't believe it. Like, you make so many references, and somehow I miss the ones that I should know. I'm a giant Kingdom Hearts fan. I played all the games, and I just beat the DLC not long ago, and I almost cried. So I'm like, I can't believe I missed that reference. But I totally get it now. I got it. So is there anything that I want to say of note for 2054? I think I mentioned this before, but I will say it now. I think it's interesting that you never commented on Stephen Harper as a character until this time. Like, he popped up when they first started dealing with the Lawless. I think that was back in chapter in Trust or Family or Recover. I think it was in Family when he popped up. Yeah, it was for the first time, and he joined them. I just found it odd that you never mentioned him. And of course, that's not a good or a bad thing in terms of the character. It was just an interesting thing. And so the first time you mentioned him was about his crusade. And of course, once he became the next antagonist for the past arc, then he started getting a lot more coverage in the comments, obviously, and also in the investigation. It was just a fascinating thing. Like, I'm not mad about it. Like, you don't have to talk about every single character all the time. I just thought it was interesting. Also, when it came to writing Stephen Harper's action scenes, I already mentioned this. I referenced Green Arrow a lot. And then when he turned bad, I referenced the Dark Archer instead. Because that's just how much of a nerd I am. Alright, that was chapters 13, 14, and 15. For this part, next part, we'll cover chapters 16, 17, and 18.